And joining me now is former Speaker of the House, Bronwyn Bishop, and Daily Telegraph journalist James Willis. Great to see you both.
Good evening.
Bronwyn, looking at these scenes and as a highly experienced, long-serving politician yourself, what do you think our leaders should be doing?
Oh, they have to take a strong stand against these demonstrations. It failed day one with the Opera House, but I listen to people like Premier Minns. He comes out and makes all the right statements and sounds quite reasonable, but nothing happens. It's all up here to look good, but the underlings down here give support to these people. So clearly, Speakman actually came out and said something very sensible today. Ban Bondi Beach as a place to have these demonstrations. And I absolutely agree with that, together with the Harbour Bridge and the forecourt of the Sydney Opera House.
Exactly.
It's time we took a stand. Enough is enough.
Yeah, every Australian should feel safe and welcome going to the beach, and it shouldn't be abused for protest. James, I want to ask you about that footage of the activist arguing with the school kid. I mean, just, you know, we obviously had to blur his face because he's a minor. That's how young he is. And the activist is pointing his finger saying, educate yourself, to a schoolboy. Yeah,
well, quickly to Bronwyn's point, I mean, the sad reality is that the legal system has, and the laws that are in place are so weak now, and the courts have become, you know, almost, we've seen this with demonstrations for a few years. They're siding with activists. They're feeling sorry for activists. They're using excuses like climate alarmism to get people off blocking the Harbour Bridge or other bridges in Sydney. But on your point, I think it's really sad that this hatred from overseas, instead of coming to Australia and saying, thank God we live in a country that has this beautiful beach, we've got a free healthcare system, free schooling, we're very safe, we are a mile away. And I think that's what most Australians really think about this, Sharri. We're lucky to live here. We can call it out as we see it. But overall, the hate we are seeing week in, week out is just so sad and so wrong. And it's now to a point where I think, and the worst part about it is some of the stuff we see, if that was to occur in the Middle East, those people would be arrested, if not worse. And the fact that they take advantage of our weak system and our freedom to sort of spout these messages, I've got a big problem with that as well.
Yeah.
But the problem is, if the Parity laws that had been introduced
That's true.
To stop the climate action people had been argued in the court with regard to the march on the Harbour Bridge, there could have been a totally different result. Why was it not argued? So if the laws aren't strong enough, make them strong enough. Court law applies until the legislature chooses to override it.
Exactly.
And that's what we have to remember. It is the Parliament that's in charge. It is the police minister who has to give orders to the police force to carry out proper policing of these things. And it's up to the Premier in this state to make sure that his words are backed up by reality and not just window dressing.
And, look,
and the other thing that made me so angry, when we had that march on the bridge, when we had the other day on the 31st, there were 3 demonstrations in Sydney, 3, plus the marathon, and the only altercation occurred in a pub afterwards when people had a drink or two. What is the footage we saw? All that stuff out of Melbourne, where, if you ask me, it was deliberately engineered, so there was fisticuffs, and that's what we see every time it's discussed.
And the cost to taxpayers of this and the waste of police resources is ridiculous. And it's every weekend, and we're just allowing it to go on.
Huge waste of police resources. Haven't seen any evidence that it was engineered in Melbourne, the fisticuffs, that it wasn't just a natural fight.
But in Sydney, it didn't happen.
It didn't happen in
Sydney. It was properly dealt with.
Yeah. I want to talk about this big story today, Australia's first treaty between a state government and Indigenous people introduced in Victorian Parliament. Now, as part of it, the Allen government is required to apologise to the First Peoples of Victoria, and school children will also be taught Indigenous truth-telling at school. Now, James, the cost is estimated to be about $326 million over 8 years. Now, Australians voted against a voice, but Victoria is pressing ahead with this.
That's right, and there were 3 components to the Uluru Statement from the Heart. This is about treaty. The cost of $326 million over 8 years I think will be unders what it eventually is, because there's talk about reparations, there's talk about what this actually looks like in terms of compensation. I mean, the one thing that sort of concerns me is that this is going to wash through the entire government, from education to schools to the way that we deal with things, to the way that police respond to things. And the concern I've got just from the education thing is the idea that kids that are Caucasian, that are white, that may not be Indigenous, are almost shamed at school or feel regret or, disappointment more than they do now, I might add, if they're being taught some of the most horrific lessons from our history. So there's a concern there, but also there's a blank cheque in regards to just how much compensation will have to be paid.
I also want to speak about this infighting in the Liberal Party. We've seen Shadow Attorney General Julian Leeser, many others have come out now to say that Jacinta Nampijinpa-Price needs to apologise for her comments 6 days ago. Have a look.
My colleague Jacinta Price said something this week that I will apologise unreservedly for.
Julian Leeser apologised on Jacinta Price's behalf, so are you doing that as well?
Well, if necessary, sure.
She just needs to apologise, clear this up and move on, doesn't she?
Yeah, I think so, Chris.
She should apologise for the hurt that has been caused.
So now this interview was 6 days ago. It was last Wednesday. Bronwyn, this is a gift to the government that this is still a topic of conversation nearly a week on. It's been mishandled from the start.
Well, yes, it has, but if Jacinta should apologise, then so should the Labor Party's pollster, because this is where that story began. It was the pollster for the Labor Party who was skiting about the number of people who were of Indian origin who had voted for the Labor Party. Now, I have ringing in my ears always a conversation with Sir Garfield Barwick when I was a very young aspirant. And he said, the one thing you should remember is that Australia should be doing things with India. And Indian people coming to Australia is of great benefit. We share an understanding of the common law. We share English as a language. And he said there is a great future for India and Australia together. And I believe that very much indeed. And it's a story I told to President Modi when I met him, when he visited. So I find this whole discussion distasteful in the extreme. But it was the Labor Party pollster who began this, and he should be held accountable as well. And as for the Liberals who are attacking from internally, there's something else bubbling along under there.
That's it.
And it is time that the Liberal Party behaved like the Labor Party can and not attack each other, thinking there might be personal advantage for them.
Yeah, I'm of the view she should have apologised, and she did misspeak, but what concerns me is the internal attacks that she has copped since that, and there's been obviously things that were leaked to Sky involving Alex Hawke, and Alex Hawke on some big clean-up job. He's got a large Indian community in his seat of Mitchell, and then his public claims, that he was assuring people that Jacinta Price was not racist. We know she isn't. And then since there's been
no one was suggesting she was.
Correct, but there's been this big sort of save face where, you've had Mark Speakman and Susan Lee go to these Indian communities and say, hey, by the way, we're not racist, we really, really like you. And it's given Labor a free kick. And ultimately, we've got a First Nations senator here who is not being supported by some of her own team, and that's not good either.
Just before we go, I want to cover this letter, Donald Trump's infamous letter to Jeffrey Epstein for his 50th birthday. It has now emerged. Now, Trump had claimed this letter didn't exist, and now lawyers for Epstein's estate have given it to Congress. This has been a big story because the Wall Street Journal first reported this in July, and they even reported that the letter had said, which it does, happy birthday and may every day be another wonderful secret. But the White House has slammed the letter even after its emergence. Statement today from Carolyn Levitt saying, as I've said all along, it's very clear President Trump did not draw this picture and he did not sign it. Now, Bronwyn, the reason this is a big story is because the Trump team had promised that all the Epstein files would be made public. The Epstein list would be made public. You had the Attorney General even referring to the list, and then suddenly there's been this change of position where there's no list that exists.
Well, there's no doubt about it. People are curious about just what did happen. Did he commit suicide? Was he murdered? How did he become a prominent person in polite society? What sort of background, what intrigue? And as for this, where's the rest of the book? Where are the others?
Well,
If we're going to see
exactly.
this,
Good point.
let's see the whole thing. Is it supposed to be a whole book that's
Excellent
bound?
point. Who else?
In which case, how come a page comes out? All I do know is that I've seen that amazing picture that hung in Epstein's property of Bill Clinton in a red dress in high heels sitting on a couch. So I find it very bizarre. Did Trump do it? I have no idea. Ghislaine says she doesn't remember it. Well, I wouldn't know. But the long and the short of it is, let's see the rest of the book. That's right.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Final thought? 30 seconds.
Well, it's a very deliberate leak and designed to attack the president, but I'd like to see the whole thing. I think the problem is that Donald Trump was on this transparency campaign when he was campaigning, and now has fallen short with this one. And his most hardcore opponents are wondering why, and it just creates conspiracies that might not even be there. So
Not to mention,
better to release it all, I reckon. Yeah.
Not to mention he was taking legal action against the Journal over this story that has now turned out to be true.
True.
James Willis, Bronwyn Bishop, love having you both on the show.
Thank you.
you.